All right, everyone, welcome to the inaugural episode of Secured Sessions, the podcast with no niche. You can find us on Instagram, YouTube, and stream our episodes on Apple Music and Spotify with new releases every single Friday. Be on the lookout for big names in every industry, verified Instagrammers before you could purchase that, and my quest to become the female Joe Rogan. So, for today's episode, you may know her as an Austin, Texas socialite, or be one of the 544,000 followers on TikTok, or simply be one of her exes lurking this podcast because her name is in it. So either way, I cannot wait for you all to meet Julie and hear about her public beef with the Kardashians, why your relationship failed, why the 45-year-old man at the club is still at that same table that he was at 20 years ago with no signs of leaving anytime soon. Please welcome to Secured Sessions, Julie.
Oh my God. Thank you so much for having me.
Of
that was
course.
the best intro I've ever been given in my life.
Thank you so much. It is the first one ever for the podcast and could not think of a better guest to have for our first inaugural episode. So kind of starting off for the first question here, I wanted just you to kind of give a brief intro to the people, let them know who you are, what you want them to know about you before we get started, and what we can do during this interview that you'd like to accomplish and share to the masses. So
My name is Julie Theis. You might know me from Psych Advice on TikTok, where I have, like you said, 540-something followers. That started just from my background is in psychology. I have a bachelor's degree in psychology, a master's degree in psychology. I've worked with thousands of women on coaching them through their own psychological addictions, working on relationships. I've had an audience for a long time on social media, but mostly what I say is I'm just some chick on the internet. So listen to me or don't. It's fine. That's on you.
for sure. But they honestly should, because she goes into great detail when it comes to why relationships might be failing. Are you dating a narcissist? What to do if you are, and kind of how to navigate dating in 2023, which, as we all know, is a slippery slope. It's dangerous out there and treacherous in these streets. So she's here to help you guys every step of the way. And hopefully you guys get some help from this episode as well, or get insulted, either or. But if you are, the shoe probably fits. So number two is going to be to kind of have you list your credentials. So I know you went to school for psychology, correct? So do you want to tell us a little bit about that and what your degree entails exactly?
Yep. I have a bachelor's degree in psychology. I have my master's degree in psychology. I've been in the psych field for the last 10 years. I've had thousands of hours of working with clients. Right now, I take clients privately, so either through mentoring them. I have an inner circle that I run with women every single week. I've written ebooks that I have. The Healing Blueprint is the best one. If you listen to this and you're like, I definitely need to up my self-awareness, that is the one that I would get. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, sounds good. And sounds like, again, a lot of credentials. So I'm sure you guys can gain a lot of value from speaking with Julie today. Speaking of value, though, and speaking of things that might not have anything to do with you, but are very interesting, I know you have a beef with the Kardashians. So let's talk about that. I have here that it really helped your platform grow a bunch. Obviously, you had a large one to begin with, but I know there was a bit of controversy. You weighed in on that. And then from there, Kylie Jenner just came to the attack. So what happened there, and what's that story?
So a huge part of what I was doing on my TikTok was I was taking celebrities and pretty much events from pop culture and doing the psychoanalysis behind them. So the Kardashians were one that I did because they were relevant. When I started out, it's one thing to give advice, but when I was in college, I created a program for high school students to how do I get them to listen about healthy relationships and how to spot a healthy relationship or unhealthy relationship. So I would always use celebrity examples. So I started my TikTok. It was just natural to do that. So I used the Kardashians forever. I was like, well, if you make enough videos about them, I would also probably say something if someone had a bunch of videos about me. But the controversy came when the Balenciaga scandal came out. So on that, you just saw so many celebrities just being so quiet about and not speaking out. And so I had made it was a funny little joke.
I thought it was fun.
That the Kardashians didn't take funny. So during the Balenciaga scandal, Kylie finally revealed her son to Instagram. And I said, Kris Jenner telling her kids to release the good photos now that the scandal is out. And Kylie Jenner responded to that. So that brought a huge astronomical hate to my profile. And she was pretty much just like, why would I ever do that? But then what I said, I was like, well, you're proving my point, because how are you coming over here when you could use your platform for actually something of value, something interesting, something to put a stop to what is happening with these pedophiles in the fashion industry. And instead, you're only speaking on things that affect you, kind of just like you did with Astroworld. And so I made a video in response to that because I don't care, like Kylie Jenner or not.
Sure.
You're in the wrong.
Yeah, exactly. It's like David and Goliath. You know, someone has to stand up to the giant, and if nobody says anything, it's just saying it's okay.
Right.
You know,
I'm a tough person to be in a verbal argument with.
Yeah.
Like,
I
you're
could
not.
see it. Wouldn't want to.
Good luck, Kylie Jenner. But that wasn't exactly what kickstarted all of my following. Like, I did get a little bit of a boost from it, but I think beyond that, it gave me a lot of respect from my followers because I didn't back down. I was like, I meant it when I said it the first time. I meant it when I said it the second time. I mean it when I say it on here. Like, use your platform for something that matters. And that's what I hope I do. You know, like I have videos on my TikTok. Some are funny, but they're meant for you to see yourself in them. And that's the same thing when I'm using pop culture examples. I don't care so much about Kylie Jenner's relationship, Kim Kardashian's relationship, but the thing is they still have themes that we experience ourselves. And that's the point of the breakdown and the psychoanalysis of those. Is for you to see yourself in it.
Absolutely. And I think someone putting themselves in the public eye, of course, you know, you can be subjected to criticism and scrutiny, but if you do something wrong, I think you should be held accountable just like a normal person. And it takes, I think, a brave person to publicly go out there and say something maybe a little bit negative about someone who's so beloved by so many. So I think that takes a lot of courage to do, and it's really admirable. And I think your followers probably appreciate that as well.
Yeah, it was wild. It was on like E! News, BuzzFeed, E! Entertainment, Dutch News, Spanish News. Like, it was absolutely, which is so sad, once again, that it's like a stupid beef with Kylie Jenner is what's hitting the news instead of like, she could have easily just spoken out.
The core of the issue.
The core of the issue about what's wrong in this world. And that is what would have blown up. But instead, our silly little beef is what blew up. And it's like point proven.
Exactly.
Point proven. Send all your minions over here instead of speaking out about something that's important.
Exactly. Instead of rallying them for the cause, rallying them against somebody who speaks negatively towards you, which is the whole reason for the cause. It's ridiculous.
Thanks for proving my point.
Yeah, exactly. So sorry, Kylie Jenner, but love you, girl, but you messed up there. So moving on to the psychology of things in the public eye, I kind of wanted to dive into something that's very prevalent in Austin, Texas, as is in many cities. So Peter Pan syndrome, guys. I want to really dive into that, the psychology behind it. Peacocking in the club, buying tables, you know, expensive cars, things like that. Why are they doing that? What are they compensating for, in your opinion, professionally? And when does it stop? When do they finally realize it's time to pack it up and start a family? Or does that ever happen?
Right. It is. So I'm originally from Montana. When I moved to Austin, I'm like, what a case study that I am in. Like, I will be at the tables. I will be in the club. I'll be at the after parties. And I'm just like taking notes. I'm like, this is just unworldly about how, and if you think about it, it's kind of like, why are there so many, you know, Peter Pans in the club? Well, I think often we think about success and we link that with money. And so we're like, you know, that must mean you're healthy on some level. But if we really think about those people that are attracted to fast money, fast wealth, women, cars, you know, everything outside of themselves, everything externally, you're going to be left with a cesspool of people that are very unhealthy and people that are very damaged. And I think that's why we see it, especially in Austin or inside of the club scene, where it can look like, oh, but, you know, a lot of these people, they do have money. Some of them. Some of it's all fake. And
which prevalent as well,
A lot of it is fake. Some of it's fake. You know, it depends on who it is, but that's the facade of it, because we are living such a glamorous lifestyle with it all. It's like it looks flashy. It looks like it should be successful. And when you think about yourself as successful, you think about, okay, I must be the best version, the healthiest version. But a lot of the people that are attracted to this scene are very broken. And that's where you get your Peter Pans, you get the peacocking, you get like, it is never enough.
Sure. Do you think that it's because they're trying to cover up some pain that they have on a deeper level for a prolonged period of time? And the longer they kind of put off addressing that, the more they party and keep covering it for years to come. And then just that way they never really have to deal with it, potentially. I'm not the psychologist here, but, you know.
I mean, what other reason would you have? And when we look at in extreme cases where you'd look at narcissism is a coping mechanism to your own self-hatred. Like narcissism is always the cover-up to a deep wound.
Sure.
And I've seen like it is rampant, the narcissism that we see in like the club scene in Austin. And it's used to cover up a deep wound.
Sure. Do you think, for those people listening where this might resonate, what would your recommendation be as a first step to remove themselves from that cycle and start to heal?
Like if you were the guy?
Yeah.
Oh,
what advice
gosh.
would you give them to maybe at least start the process of removing yourself if they're a little scared to do that?
So I've been asked that before. It's like, does narcissism have a cure? So what I would say is, you're like, what would be the first step? I would be shocked if a man came to me and said, I want to cure this.
Yeah.
Because narcissism as a coping mechanism, it is their safety, their comfort. It's a way that they don't have to look at their wounds. They don't have to look at their emotions. They don't have to be held emotionally responsible. They can abuse and exploit and damage. And so there's a lot of positives for them to keep that narcissism. So the only way where I would really ever see a man be like, okay, can you please help me? Would probably be because something else was damaged, and so that they could get back on their path to narcissism. It would be all like, oh, I like this is the crack in my identity. How do I get back to that? Narcissists are extremely hard to treat in therapy because of that reason.
Right.
But I mean, if you're not dealing with a narcissist, let's say you're just like dealing with a guy, he's like, yeah, I'm actually realizing that all of my relationships are superficial and this life is empty, which is it is the same with narcissists. Like they feel that emptiness finally when everything quiets down. So I think most people would never come to me and be like, I want to heal this. But if you do get one, it is about, it's like, what are you running away from? And I will say this at after parties because I get bored and why not? But I will and more so even with the women because we're all there, right? It's 3 a.m. and then it's 5 a.m. And I'll go, I'm like, why do you think we don't want to go home right now? Like, what are we waiting for to happen? It's the same people. You're circling the drain, talking about the same things. Like, what else is going to happen? And I mean, that's a question. Like, I'm in the scene too. I have to ask myself. And so I see it way less with men, but sometimes, the women, they'll think about it and then they'll be like, I don't know. And then good luck with me getting a guy to think about it. But I'll ask those questions. I'm like, why do you think you don't want this done? What are you afraid of when you lay down and it's all quiet and the party's done?
The way I would crumble if somebody asked me that at an after party, I'd be like, whoa. But I feel like I am the kind of person where I try to be introspective a little bit. And I think a lot of people who know me know that I did remove myself from kind of that scene. I was more heavily involved in it. And I did take some time to kind of find out who I was without that and sort through those things the best I could, you know. And obviously I'm not completely removed, but I do think it was important for me and it definitely made a difference to kind of analyze exactly what you were saying, So with that said, I think bringing it back to dating, away from the narcissism a little bit, what would you say in 2023 is the biggest mistake that men make while dating and the biggest mistake that women make while dating?
I think it's, for both genders, it's the lack of self-reflection and knowing where their feelings or behaviors come from, but they do it in slightly different ways. So for, let's say when you're unhappy, I would say women tend to blame themselves more for it. Like, let's say if a relationship isn't working or they're like, oh, it must be me, I must be anxiously attached. When really it's like, well, that person also hasn't called you back and said that they would, and they're lying to you and they're creating mistrust. But so women will really internalize why things aren't working, and that comes from a lack of self-awareness to be like, this is my shit and this is your shit. Mm-hmm. For men, I see them tend to do the opposite, where they're like, oh, I'm not happy and something feels off. It must be you, and I'm going to cut you off now, or I'm going to run away from this situation. Mm-hmm. So for both parties, that comes from a lack of self-awareness for fixing what is yours. But we're all wounded. Everyone has, and the scary part is you have adults walking around with severe childhood wounds and acting like children. And the ones that aren't self-aware will just continue acting and not be aware of why their life ended up the way that it ended up, and they'll blame things outside themselves. Anyways, you end up getting people who are very unhappy, people who are very empty, people who are very lonely.
Sure.
And neither party's being able to like work it out.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. So with that said, you said something about, a man maybe getting overwhelmed and leaving. What do you think causes the majority of men to ghost? Because I've seen it time after time, whether it be friendships, online. Women think, or vice versa, that something's going really, really well, and all of a sudden they stop hearing from this person and they're just confused, bewildered, don't know why. Do you think there's a psychological reason? Obviously not as a blanket statement for everyone, but a common theme as to why.
Yeah, there is a psychological reason, and I would say it is a pretty close blanket statement for everyone.
There you go, guys.
I think especially, men are in this generation, probably like it's been this way, they're extremely emotionally stunted because men grow up in a society where they're not taught how to process emotions or to deal with emotions, or they're taught that anger is an okay emotion but sadness isn't, but grief isn't. So you have them literally just never developing the skill of how do I process what's going on inside me. So then they learn to run because action is taught to be safe for men. Fleeing is taught to be safe for men, but emotions aren't. And it comes with practice. Like, even when you're kids, like, it's like by the time, like, two children are, like, 6 years old, a girl or, like, 5 little girls will say, like, double the amount of words that, like, little boys will have said. And I worked as a behavioral specialist before I ever did any social media, and I worked in the schools. So I worked from kindergarteners to high schoolers, and you already see the gap from boys. And part of that is how the brain develops. Like, women are naturally more verbal, but then we get a society that says this is how it should be.
So do you think there's a fix for that? How do we fix that even, as the next generation coming up into being parents? What would you say is, a way to parent to allow them to know, hey, emotions are okay. We don't have to run away or act strong or tough. It's okay to feel, feminine, or what's typically been known as feminine.
Well, even before we get to like parenthood, I think there's a way that we can fix this by, it's like, as women, if that's your partner, what are the behaviors that you accept? Do you accept a man who is so emotionally stunted and let him come back? And let him continue to mistreat you, him not. Because, right, if we're talking about becoming parents, you want that man to then be able to pass along his seed to an offspring, because that is all, like, the man who's emotionally stunted, I guarantee you his parents were emotionally stunted.
Right.
And his mom probably has her own issues, but you have the father that also is saying that that's not safe. So it's like, who are you picking, first of all, for that partner? And who are we allowing that this behavior is okay? Because I see this all the time with my clients, and sometimes I think it's sad, but I get it. It's like whenever I say, like, heal yourself, maybe.
Right.
Attract the partner of your dreams. People are on it. They're like moths to a light. They want it so bad because people desire to be loved more than they desire to fix themselves. Obviously, to have a healthy love, you have to fix yourself.
Sure.
But if I was marketing it, guess what I would market?
Of course, yeah.
I would market the outcome that people want, which is to be loved. So if we're thinking about what will actually motivate someone to be fixed, like I said, a man will never come up to me in a club and be like, hey, can you fix my narcissism? But they might when they come and they say, actually, I can't form a healthy relationship. I'm so empty inside, and everything I've ever cared about, I've destroyed.
Yeah.
And that sometimes does happen, and they'll be 50.
Sure,
hopefully.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you have to find out, it's like, well, what will motivate someone? If you're like, what will fix this? Stop dating these people that are emotionally abusive because of their own emotional immaturity.
And enabling, yeah.
It's enabling it. And the sad thing is I think there's this huge uprising of strong, intelligent women who are just like, I'm actually done. Like, I'm beautiful, I'm successful.
Sure.
The part that actually scares me is there will probably always be a subset of women who will allow it. Like, we all have to be on the same page, because it's about to be where the beautiful, successful, the women that would be the catch, and this is what we're seeing, they are single.
Right.
Chronically single. And they should have everything. And so we'll end up seeing this subset of women who are still in there, like, pick me, choose me, love me.
Sure, of course.
And they will be the one, and the men will be like, okay, well, cool. Now someone's putting up with my behavior.
Yeah, so it's okay.
So it's like, before we even get to how can I raise my son so he's emotionally mature? Stop picking these emotionally immature partners to raise kids with.
Yeah. And start raising ourselves too. It's another big thing. So you would say to attract a healed person, you should first be a healed person.
You have to be.
Yeah.
And if you're attracting unhealed people, I will say you're still an unhealed person.
Yeah. It's valid. Very valid. Almost too valid. But that's okay. Discussion for another day. But, well, cool. No, that definitely makes sense. And I think it really could help a lot of people. It is prevalent.
I'm saying that, like, the putting the boundaries down, not only will it help you, but it's the only way, like, I think they will ever be motivated to fix this. It's like when they're going to be alone.
Yeah.
Because if someone put up with my shitty behavior, I wouldn't fix it either.
Well, yeah, and you have the inkling probably in your head that you'll find someone else who will. You think probably, oh, that can't be the only person who will put up with it. It might take a minute, but I'm sure I'll find someone else so I don't actually have to look within. I'm sure.
And like I said, there's benefits to their emotional immaturity. There's benefits to someone's like narcissism. There's benefits to avoidant attachment.
Sure.
Unless like so that the pain, the punishment has to be greater than that for anyone to actually want to look in.
That makes sense. So on that note, though, I know it might be difficult to some or it might just be what they're used to, but how would you say you can spot a narcissist, let's say from afar, in disguise? You're just meeting this guy. You feel really good about him. You're excited. He seems amazing. Are there any early red flags to kind of try and decode that before it's too late and you're already attached and invested? And he's obviously hiding that for now.
Right.
And vice versa with women as well.
Yeah, lack of empathy is the main one. And when that's gone, I think that's the scariest type of narcissist. And most will like hide that, but sometimes a lot of the times I'll be like, what do you think about homeless people? Like, don't ask with you because they're going to love you. They're going to think you're awesome. Ask them about how they view someone who would be hierarchically below them in their head, right?
Sure.
Like wait staff. How do you feel about homeless people? And it can be one thing if they have an opinion, but if they're like, I ask this question, they will have very hateful beliefs. Not even like, oh, I can see like hateful beliefs.
Interesting.
So that's one. Too much too soon. Like I get it as someone who is like super awesome and cool. Like it makes sense, right? Like that you're so obsessed and in love with me right away.
Why would they not? Of course.
But they don't know that about you yet. They truly don't know who you are. So if they already love you, they are like you could be really cool.
Sure.
But if they love you, you're babe, you're like no one they've ever met and you haven't told them anything. And that's what I say too is be careful about the information you divulge about yourself. Like for me, I think of it like you have to unlock certain information. Like I don't tell people a lot about me when I'm dating, and I will pay attention then. What are the things they're saying to me? Because I know I haven't revealed a lot about myself. So if I'm already amazing without them really knowing anything, like you can like my energy, but that shouldn't come with like, I'm going to take you on a trip, you're babe, you're this, the pet names, all of that.
Yeah, very interesting. So that's kind of how you would distinguish to like love bombing, for example. You would say too much too soon. It's also a sign of narcissism, but that's kind of a good way to tell if it's love bombing versus they just like you.
Right, because it's like the thing with like love bombing and narcissists and like people with like borderline can do love bombing too, but the reason why they do is because they're missing something and they're like they have that wound, that hurt injury. They find someone. And it doesn't matter who you are. Probably you just look good to them.
Sure.
But so they're projecting everything, their ideals, everything they want you to be onto you. And because if they don't know you, they're just seeing you for everything they want you to be.
Sure.
And I'll like pay attention to it because sometimes I'll hear a compliment from someone, maybe we're newly dating, and I'm like, that's not even like me. And I can tell it's coming from their own projection, which means that's coming from their own wound that they want me to fill. And this is what happens with narcissists and why you go into the devaluation stage. A narcissist in the beginning actually probably does like you.
Sure.
They are that excited about you. And when they meet you and they're love bombing you, they're like, finally, this person who's going to fill my void and fill the hole in my life. What happens with the devaluation stage is they're like, you're human, you're flawed, and they are angry at you. They feel like you have deceived them for making them believe that about you. When really it's like they didn't take the time. But so be careful. It's like if someone loves you so much in the beginning, how much do they know about you? Because when they figure out who you actually are, and it could still be an amazing person, but it has to be different than their projection to fill and fix their empty life.
Yeah.
They're going to be angry at you. And then that's when you see, you're like, why can't he treat me like he did in the beginning? Like, he was so great. Like, I don't get it. He was there. He was great to the projection he had of you in his mind. And you have that of him too.
That was my next question.
Yeah.
I was going to say, so you both built this image of each other. Neither's correct. The first one isn't any fault of your own. That's what he built of you. But what you've seen of him, you have this picturesque view. So do you think that's how people get stuck in the cycle of abuse then, is they have that ideal of how it was, even though that was never really him, and want it to go back there?
Of course, yeah. That is the very definition of a trauma bond. It's like the same person who elicited these very positive and happy emotions is also the one who's eliciting this pain, and then they come in and fix it, right? And so you're stuck. And it's people wait forever. It's one of the number one things I hear with my clients. Of like, but he was so great in the beginning. You're in love with a ghost. You're in love with a fantasy, something that wasn't real. And it's like, again, and that's why I say, like, two toxic people we have different flavors of toxic. You might not be abusive, but you too are wanting someone to fill that empty void.
Sure.
And they do it with this fairy tale and how our Western media doesn't help with that, of how we view a love story should be. And he's going to sweep you away off your feet. Like, if you look at, like, a fairy tale romance, like, they get married, like, in one day, like, it promotes love bombing.
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely.
And then we're like, as little girls, we're taught, like, you be a princess. Be the princess.
Right.
And it's like, oh, you meet someone who treats you like a princess. Well,
it makes sense.
Dangerous.
But exactly, yeah. Do you think that there is such a thing, and this was a question that somebody submit to me actually for the podcast, as the right person but the wrong time? Do you think that exists?
If it's the wrong time, then it's not the right person. And I would be so careful in even thinking about, like, the right person, because that will then usually give us this idea of, like, soulmates, when in reality there's probably multiple people in this, maybe not in Austin.
Sure, yeah.
but in other places that could be right for you. Saying, like, right person, wrong time, well, then you could be like, well, it's the right person, but, like, only if he would just heal his avoidant attachment, and only if it would be the right time, and only if he, like, didn't call me names, and only if he didn't, like, time is just another one of those factors. For it to be the right person, they have to want to build a life with you, want to, like, work on their own shit, want to work on the issues that you have in a relationship. That's what makes the right person.
Sure.
So what would someone mean, right person, wrong time? Because that's part of your character. If you're not in the right part of your life, is it time, or is it because of your own, like, emotional wounds?
Sure.
Right? And that doesn't make you the right person then. But when we think like this, that is also, we accept worse behavior because we have this ideology of a soulmate and twin flame. And if this person is my soulmate, then of course I'm going to put up with these bad behaviors. But all of their behaviors and their character traits is what's not going to make them the right person.
Sure.
So time aside.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. And that kind of segues into what I was wanting to ask next, which is what I was typing out as you were talking, because it brought it to my mind. But I have a friend, right? And he and I talk pretty frequently, and we typically have pretty similar views, but we don't know if those are correct or if that's, psychological things from the past. So when it's time to pick that person, when you feel ready, you think you are, and someone comes along and on paper, they're great. They're amazing. They, have a good job, seem to be very mentally stable. We don't think that they're, a narcissist. We've done our due diligence on that. But there's just certain things you can't stand about them, and you feel like, man, maybe if I keep holding out a little longer, I'll find someone that doesn't have those icks and they'll be perfect. Do you think you should make those concessions when that person comes along, or where do you draw the line? Like, is that our gut speaking, or is that past trauma speaking?
Yeah, I mean, if it is your past trauma speaking, then there's probably healing to be done. But I think, like, love is hard enough with even the right person.
Yeah.
So and again, when I say, like, women, they tend to introspect and they're like, oh, it's my past trauma, that's why this guy isn't right. But really, it could just be he's not. Right. He's not the right guy. Love is hard enough. And what you need is, you do need both compatibility and you need that chemistry, because love is hard enough. So you could have the compatibility. Everything makes sense on paper. If you don't have that chemistry, like 3 months down the line, a year down the line, 5 years down the line, you're not going to be motivated enough to make it work. Then on the other hand, you can have the chemistry, but without the compatibility of two people wanting to work and heal those things where it makes your relationship difficult, it's not going to. So I think both things need to be present. And I see it all the time with like my friends, my clients, of like women really beating themselves up when someone, it's like, but this person should work. But it doesn't have to be any deeper than like, if there's not that compatibility plus chemistry there, it's not, you're not going to make it for the long run.
Sure, absolutely. And I think that makes perfect sense. You know, he was telling me that I guess there was a girl, and I won't name any names, just so you know, guys, but there was a girl who he thought he liked initially. On paper, perfect. Everything was great, right? But as time passed, he slowly realized the chemistry portion wasn't there. There was something within him, and he couldn't quite put his finger on it, that made it feel like it wasn't his person. So he went to therapy about it, as most men should, and as, you know, all of us should as well. And she said that he was making a mistake. She said, you should stay with that person and stick it out. This is probably your trauma talking, but you should give them more of a chance and kind of force something that might not feel right in your gut. So I personally disagreed with that, more on just the chemistry end of it, to what you were saying. But that's kind of why I was asking, just due to that situation and kind of knowing, okay, when is it maybe based on trauma and when is it just lack of chemistry?
And it does depend. That's why, like I say, the biggest mistake people make in dating is this like lack of self-awareness. I know for myself, like I was in a relationship and it was healthy and I felt myself starting to be like bored. And I remember talking to my therapist, I'm like, I'm so glad I know myself well enough to know what is, you know, my trauma speaking and what is actually. It ended up being that relationship progressed. And I ended up ending it, but not for those initial like, flight. I don't know why I don't feel safe. And that's a very like, that part of my brain isn't conscious. It was for conscious reasons that were completely separate from the like, you know, this is boring because I'm used to chaos and I grew up in trauma and all of that. So if you know yourself, then you trust yourself. If you don't know yourself, it could very well be. And so that's why it is important, because you'll be able to distinguish. Because what I will say is if you have like how rare it is to find someone that you both have chemistry with and you like to be with is rare. And if you find that, I wouldn't let it go.
Sure.
And a lot of people do for the next best thing. And they do because of that initial, like if it kind of feels like it comes out of nowhere and they're just like, I gotta run. That's probably your trauma speaking.
Sure.
If it's like actually there's a reason for this chemistry and it lacking. Like for me, I was like, I need someone who is more of a leader. Like that is beyond trauma. That's just something I want. And
absolutely a preference.
That wasn't the thing that like made me like run away.
Right.
And so that's why it's so important to know yourself, because it could be. I've seen people do it. I've seen many people sabotage their relationships and walk away from something great.
So kind of the time span then, you would say, if it's an initial knee-jerk pretty soon, then it's probably based on trauma. But if you take your time, you get to know this person, and after what you've seen, you kind of then feel off, it's probably more so just chemistry.
Yeah, and even if like for this guy, even if it was his trauma, to still sit in it and to be forced, it's still like then it's not the right time, so then it's not the right person. So maybe and then on her, like hopefully she can find solace that if it is his trauma, like it's still not written in the stars for this to work, even if he is doing it because of his trauma. Regardless, if you feel like I have a gut reaction to not be with this person, you either heal and do it, but if you're trying to like force it in that moment, he's going to end up resenting her. It's not going to work at this time.
Sure. Do you think it's possible for a couple to date and maybe separate for reasons like that, just amicably, and then revisit in the future and have it be an effective, you know, rejoin, you know, come back together, have it be better than the first time? Or do you think you'll always in the back of your mind have things in your head from the first time?
Well, it depends like how much healing, why it ended. But of course, and I think, you know, I get the question of like, should I get back with my ex? It's like, well, what were the initial problems in the relationship? So even like with this, what are the initial problems in the relationship, and have both parties work to fix them? Some people, they're only like, I see all those like tarot readings on TikTok and everything, and they're like, I'm gonna like manifest my ex back, and it's like, you want him back the way he is? Like, no, we want the fantasy, the first like love bombing, the like best parts of him, but like, you could get your ex back right now. I can get my ex back right now. But, like, do I want that? Like, because they're probably the same person. So if you're getting back together with someone, you better hope they have a track record of what they did to fix the initial problems that were in the relationship.
Right.
And that can happen. That's possible.
For sure. I mean, it makes sense, but it's like at the same time, if they haven't changed, what's worse, being alone, or being in a relationship where you feel that way, right? I mean, it's kind of a double-edged sword there. I don't know that there's a better option besides, being alone and just healing.
What's sad, though, is people will pick being miserable in a relationship than being alone.
Why do you think that is?
Because people are so afraid of being alone.
Yeah.
They'll pick the false sense. They are alone in that relationship, and it's empty. There's the study with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and they did one studying it. We have food on the bottom, and then you get to love, touch, and self-actualization is at the top. But they did this experiment with monkeys, baby monkeys. On one side, they had this wire mother monkey, all made out of wires, but it had a bottle to feed, and it looked ugly and creepy, and the monkeys couldn't really grab onto it. The other one was a cloth-covered mother monkey. So pretty much made of ceramic and then covered over with a cloth. Gave no food, couldn't do anything. So what would these monkeys do? The monkeys clung onto the cloth monkey.
Wow.
Even though it didn't meet their needs, it didn't hold them, it didn't soothe them, it didn't comfort them.
Interesting.
Because the cloth was better. They clung onto the cloth monkey until they got so hungry that they had to go over to the scary wire mom monkey, and they drink out of the bottle. So they would drink the bottle, and then they would immediately go back over and sit with that. And I say this a lot to my clients. I say when they'll explain a man who just completely sucks, and I'm like, he's your cloth monkey. And I've had that.
Sure.
I've had that. And
we all have, yeah.
Especially me with my self-awareness, I'm like, damn, you're nothing more than my cloth monkey. But a lot of us are we have abandonment wounds, and sometimes the cloth monkey is better than nothing. And it goes to show you, even in our primal state, we're meant to bond. But if we realize as people, we're not just monkeys with two choices, we can actually go out and find someone who can be that comfort and meet our needs and hold us and value us. But so many people, they don't believe that they're worthy of it. That's a huge one.
Sure.
Because if you really believed you could find better and it could be easy, you would leave in a minute.
Right.
You believe that that's all that you deserve, and so you're going to stay with that.
Exactly. No, I completely agree. And I think rounding out on that as well, when, say, a man's in a relationship or a woman, and they choose to stay with the person they're with, but kind of veer off and then come back, and they have that comfort at home, but they're, cheating or talking to other people outside of that relationship. That seems to be pretty common, but they do have that stable person at home that they know they can come back to. What would you say, if you are that person at home, is the best way to catch a cheater just psychologically? Kind of what would the signs look like to you if you're that comfort at home and you kind of feel like it could be happening, but you're not sure? Is there anything to look for?
Yeah, the even statement of how do you catch a cheater is so scary, because that hopefully you're in a relationship and that isn't your goal, to catch a cheater. So even prior to, hopefully you're picking a partner that doesn't have those traits. What are the traits of a cheater? Cheaters are deeply insecure. They're deeply broken. Again, they're covering up a wound. You probably know, without even knowing if they cheated on you, that they are that person.
Sure.
And those traits alone will manifest in abusive behaviors to you, and behaviors that will leave you messed up probably for quite some time. And so if you are accepting that his insecurity, the way he takes things out on you, the way he's unwilling to look at himself, you're already willing to accept that. It's God, do you even care at that point if he's cheating? What I find the most interesting about women who are so apt to catch him cheating, those are always the women who won't even leave when they find the information.
Yep.
The woman who is crazy about looking at his phone, figuring it out, playing detective, messaging other girls, have you been talking to a man? That woman is not strong enough to even leave.
Sure.
So I wouldn't even be if they're how do I catch him cheating? I'm you're not, why? You're not going to leave.
What will you do when you do?
Yeah.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah,
sure.
you already know who he is. And so it's and is cheating, it's not some people's even leaving point.
Sure.
So but if it is, it's is that when you're finally going to say this relationship isn't worthy? Do you have to catch him cheating before you know that you are being disrespected? It's so rare that I've ever worked with a client. I honestly don't think I ever have. And I know someone's going to be that was me. Or working with someone that is he cheated, and the writing wasn't on the wall. Like, what? He was so perfect in every regard. And I know some people are going to say, oh, mine was. But no, he wasn't. You're in denial still. When you're done being in denial, you'll see all the ways that his story didn't line up. They made you feel unheard.
Sure.
Your needs weren't important. Your needs came last. Like that. And that's more important than catching a cheater.
Sure.
It's, do you want to be with the person that has the traits of a cheater? Who cares if the cheating occurred or not?
True. So, speaking of using your platform for good, you actually started a clothing line, Cognitive Couture. So, let's talk a little bit about how that got started, where the idea came from, and where you plan to go with that.
Yeah, so it's actually a clothing rental subscription service. So, it's really cool because you get 2 or 4 items every single time. You pay a monthly fee, you get it, then you send it back, you get new items. Anyways, the reason why I love it is because it really is like changing out your personality anytime you want. I have ADHD, and something with like people with ADHD is you are like a compulsive like shopper. You're trying to get like that dopamine, so you always have like new clothes on demand. It's not like some subscription services you just get 1 box a month. You can literally get like 5 in 1 month if you can go through it as fast as you want.
That's amazing.
So you get 1 box, you send it back, you get another box, send it back. So and also there's this idea behind it, like Cognitive Couture. I wanted to be in line with smart fashion. There's so much waste that goes into fashion and buying, and again, even when we talk about like filling the void, the way that we fill the void in this world is very damaging to not only ourselves but to the planet and to the world. So I love the idea about creating something that is both sustainable but also allows you to change out your clothing as much as you change out your mood. That's how I am, or my personality, whoever I want to be that day.
Absolutely.
So I love it because I work with so many women, and it's slightly separate than my psychology brand, but I love fashion.
Yeah.
I love women, and I work with so many of them, and so just to have like an option. Also, I have a personal story. Like growing up, I grew up really poor, and I didn't like have clothes, and so just knowing like having something in your closet and always rotating out was pretty much the idea behind it.
Absolutely. And that's really beautiful, and how it ties into your personal brand too and can help a lot of other people as well. So I think that's amazing. With the clothing line, obviously I know you plan to probably grow that and continue that, but what else is next for you? What is coming up? Any big plans, big releases coming out?
Yes, I do have I have a couple really big things on the horizon. Yes, so I am just getting started by on the down, so everything is just getting started. So I'm really excited, but I would say if you're listening to this and any of this resonates, please follow me on TikTok at Psych Advice. Please follow my Instagram, which is just my name, Julie Theis Official. And then if you were listening to this dating advice and you're like, oh my gosh, I need to be part of this, I would highly encourage you to join my Psych Advice Inner Circle. We meet twice every week. One of the sessions is focused solely on healing yourself. Healing from your childhood wounds, your past. And then on Wednesday session, we always focus on healing either yourself inside of a relationship or yourself from past relationships, past abuse, to actually be able to attract the relationship of your dreams. And that is something where I still am having founding members come on, but pretty soon the pricing for that will increase. But right now it's not. So people should join because it's super, super affordable.
Yeah.
I also have, if you're like, oh, I really need to develop my self-awareness, I have my healing blueprint for sale as well. And that is massive for just getting you to the point where you need to get to.
Absolutely. And guys, I feel like in this day and age too, it is very rare to find a safe space where you can collaborate with other people who might be healing in different ways and come together and work on, healing together. That's massive. So
that's the best part. Like the other women in it are amazing. Like you'll hear their stories. Some of the girls, they're like, it's almost like reality TV because we know everyone's like relationship. And like last week we had a client and she was just, she knew. She would say, she's like, this guy sucks. Like, he does nothing. Like, he was her cloth monkey. And she, came to the last session. She's like, we're done. And they've been broken up for a couple of weeks. And everyone's, just cheering her on. And we're, so supportive. But we were with her through the, we heard it all. And so, and there's, so many women with those stories. But, and they're just doing awesome. And I always say, too, and this is what I think is going to be cool about your podcast is, any change in perspective is a miracle. Because when we change our thoughts, your decision making will start to change. And that's what I'm doing inside the inner circle. And whenever you get a new piece of information and it clicks and it changes your belief system, that'll change your decisions. And when you change your decisions, you are changing your life.
Sure.
It sounds extreme, but any change in perspective is a miracle.
I believe it. And I think it can feel really isolating too, going through something on your own and maybe not knowing if you want to tell your friends or your family, or maybe you don't have anybody, you're living in a new city. So having a support system like that, you might find that more people than you think are going through similar things.
It's
you might feel even a little less alone.
We have women in there who are in their 50s. We have women in there who are in their 20s. And it can be hard doing something as a group. A lot of people think like, oh, that's not going to fit for me, or my story might be so unique and different. There's so much healing to be found in. We actually have the themes are the same, and the themes are always like the lack of self-worth, finding out how to love yourself, making those decisions of what would someone who loves himself actually do beyond like what would someone who is running away and filling a void and all of that do.
Absolutely. Well, I think that's really beautiful. And I think obviously a lot of people can gain a lot of value from this. It shows they already are, and it's making such a positive impact along with, you know, the clothing brand and everything you're doing right now. So I really want to thank you for coming on and for your time. You guys know where to find her. She let you know. And, you know, who knows, she might be starting a podcast of her own soon. So stay tuned for that.
Things will be, I'll tell you, big things are coming.
All right, guys, we're excited to see it. Thank you so much for tuning in to the inaugural episode of Secured Sessions, the podcast with no niche. Remember to follow us on Instagram, YouTube, Apple Music, and Spotify to see which big name we bring on next and witness me transform into my final form of the female Joe Rogan. Love you guys so much. Thank you for tuning in. See you next time.